All right, everybody, we are just one night away from opening night for Halloween Horror Nights, and it's about time I give you guys my hype list. I have a lot of messages that come in via comments, private messages, in the park. So many people ask me, what is your hype list for the year? And I'm not gonna lie to you, it has been changing day over day, week after week. It's been hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's a weird year where I feel like there's no specific list of houses that I'm that crazy about, I would say, but I'm also not liking any of the houses. I'm weirdly into all of the houses. I think they all could be like a very good house. And I say this every year and everyone's gonna say, you say that every time, but typically my hype list is like 8, 9, 10. My hype level is like around the 5 to 6 range, where this year I feel like even my 8, 9, 10 is like an 8 or 9 on my hype list. Like my hype list is just radiating with hype right now. So anyway, let's just get started and let's get going with it. Before we do get started, if you do enjoy today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Coming in at number 10 is Slaughter Cinema 2. And I know a lot of you probably are like, what are you talking about? Slaughter Cinema was a great house. And I do think it was from what I saw with the walkthrough, but that's not really my type of house, I guess. And like, it's not really something that I'm super into. And I'm only super hyped about it. I know it's number 10, but it is still really hyped for me only because I know of the first one. But for me, I never went to HHN during that time. I didn't do that house, so I only have what I saw online, and I'm not like this like huge like B movie kind of person. So yeah, for me it's number 10, but still probably going to be a fantastic house. And I do also want to say that this is my hype list. This isn't a prediction list, so I'm not like predicting what's going to be like my favorite house. This is just like how hyped up I am for it. So that is number 10 for me. Number 9 is Latin Monsters, and I'm excited for it because I heard so many good things from last year's over in Hollywood, but I am hearing that it is like a direct replica, which makes me a little nervous. So I know it was a good house. I'm just like, well, are we getting something new at all, or is it really just going to kind of be like picked up, drop shipped here, and that's kind of like how it goes? I don't know. It could be a lot of fun. I do like when we have these monster style houses, so I think it's still going to be a really good house, but my hype for it just isn't quite there because we've seen it. So I'm like, oh, I don't know how it's really going to turn out. Now coming into number 8, this house is something that I feel like could be a boom or bust this year, and that is going to be the Museum Deadly Exhibit. And I'm just nervous because at first I was like, this could be an awesome house. And then the more that I kind of like thought about it, I'm like, well, it's either really going to deliver in my opinion, or I think people might just feel like it's not quite there. And the reason I say that is because it's like the museum atmosphere can either be really cool or it can be kind of almost a little gimmicky, because it's like, well, everything comes to life in the museum. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, fine. But also, I mean, I understand it. It's just like, how much are we going to feel like, oh, like we're just kind of utilizing props versus like, oh, like there's a really good story here, if that kind of makes sense. So for me, I'm a little worried that it might not be that level of interest and scare that we want from the museum style house. And instead it just feels like we're like, oh, like we're kind of just like using random stuff because it's a museum, so why not? Now, number 7 is Insidious. And I'm not gonna lie to you, my hype for it was like 9 or 10, but I did hear that this house is incredibly scary. And I have not seen the Insidious films, so it's kind of low for me, just like The Exorcist from last year, because I'm like, well, I didn't see The Exorcist, so I'm not that hyped for it. So I haven't seen the Insidious movies. I think Nicole has seen one of them, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. But because I've been hearing that the house is scary, I'm like, now my interest is piqued. But because I don't have this like track record with the movie, I'm like, like I'm still hyped for it, but I'm like, I don't really know what to expect because I haven't seen the movies. So I guess I technically could still watch the movies, but I don't know how much time I'm gonna have before opening night at this point. Coming in at number 6, this one is interesting. It is Triplets of Terror. And originally I was like, this is like 9 or 10 for me. What's going on here? And then a little bit of time passed and I was like, is that Triplets of Terror house going to be like super good or what? And then it kind of like dropped and it went back and forth. So this has been definitely the one that I have not been able to find a spot for, because like it's made top 3 a few times. It's been in my bottom 3 a few times. And I kind of put it here at 6, but in all honesty, it could be a lot higher just on my hype for it, because like every day it kind of shifts. I should put it higher because it is in a soundstage, and I really like the houses that go in the sound stages because I feel like you're able to do so much. If you look at a house like Blood Moon, if that went into, let's say, a tent house, I don't feel like you would have had this grand scale house, and it would have probably not delivered as much. Not saying it would have been bad, but I feel like Blood Moon was so good last year because they were able to go so like big with it, because the fact that it was in a soundstage. So knowing that Triplets is in a soundstage, really, I probably should put it in top 4 at this point, but I'm putting it there just because like I'm still just confused, and I don't know, I want it to be good though. Coming in at number 5 is Monsters Eternal Bloodlines, and it's hard for me to put the Monsters not in top 3, but I'm a little worried that we have too many monsters inside of a house, and it feels like they might be stretching a little bit. From what I heard, the Bride of Frankenstein house was like super good and people loved it. So it goes to show that you don't necessarily have to put all of these iconic characters from the monsters realm into a house. And in my opinion, I just feel like sometimes if you add too many, you overshadow them to the point that you don't get connected with them. Where I feel like Legends Collide was so good, and you got to watch, you know, the Mummy and Wolfman and Dracula. Dracula was overshadowed for the longest time. I feel like you hardly saw him for a long time. Then they started to add him more into the house, and it really did well. Last year, I mean, look at Invisible Man. I feel like, I guess it's kind of funny because you didn't see him too much, but it was like you had like one room with him, maybe 2 instances where you saw him or saw him, and it was like, oh, like I would have liked to see a little bit more Invisible Man. I think Hunchback was kind of the same way. You saw a little bit of him, but it definitely felt like there was more Phantom in there. And so I'm just worried that there's too many characters that they're trying to compete with in there that you don't really get to like root for them or root against them in the same capacity that I'd like for a Monsters house. But I'm still excited, and that's why it's at 5, because like it's Monsters, and I loved the Monsters houses in the past, so I'm hoping that this one kind of delivers. Number 4 is Goblin's Feast, and I don't know, I like the idea of Goblin's Feast. I think it could be a really cool house, and I think it's in one of the new sprung tents, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm curious to see how these new tents work out, and I just think the idea of goblins is pretty cool. Quick story, when I went to Six Flags, like the Fright Fest years ago at this point, probably like 2004 or something, a long time ago, one of the things that creeped me out the most were these like giant goblin dudes, and they had like spiky shoulders. It was Six Flags Great America. If any of you guys had went, you know what I'm talking about. I was in like 5th grade or 6th grade or something, and there was like these giant goblins. They looked like they were 7 feet tall with these like green masks, and like I said, the spiky shoulders, and they freaked me out to the point I was like dodging them, and I was like, I am never going back to Fright Fest, and I'm never going to a Halloween event ever again. I was young, and I was just, I don't know, it freaked me out. So there's like a little special part in my heart that is like, goblins can be like creepy and freak me out. So maybe there's like a little like PTSD when I go in that house. I'm like, oh, it's the goblins again. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for that one. A lot of it comes from that, but I just like, you know, kind of that type of lore anyway. I think it's really fun. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Number 3 is Major Suites. I feel like they've really gotten behind the Major Suites idea. I think like they really themed up that whole area. You've got the whole like San Francisco candy company over there that has some stuff. The candy, the idea. I think it's just really smart marketing for them. And I was just a little nervous because I don't like the houses typically that are in the Fast and Furious house, because or like the ride, but the house that's there. And I'm always like, I feel so disconnected, because you go outside and it's like, here's part 2, but it's like, it just kind of like takes you out of it a little bit. So I don't know if they're doing that this year based on the location of the facade that I think is the entry, and the fact that I think we're using a different part of the queue now to go in. I don't know if we're going to have that weird separation. I'm hoping it's all one fluid house. And I'm really excited for that because it's different than what we had in the past years. I think that's what I'm seeing, at least. We enter from a different spot. I think the way you kind of navigate the house is going to be different. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. Plus, I feel like Candy Factory, like how can you not be excited for that? Plus, Major Sweets, the Scare Zone was awesome too. I don't gotta explain it. It's a cool zone, and then it's gonna be a cool house. So, or at least I hope. Number 2 is Ghostbusters. But Ghostbusters was number 1 for a little while, and it's got a little bit of a special place again for me because I'm not like a huge Ghostbusters fan, but I like the movies. I just rewatched the first one a few months ago, and they're just like kind of feel good movies in all honesty. And I know they're kind of like the fun horror humor kind of thing that goes on there. And from what I hear, I think the old Ghostbusters house, a lot of people really enjoyed, but Nicole had no interest in watching like the old Ghostbusters. I like put it on and she's like, no, I have no interest. She was probably like working on a Saturday or something instead of watching the movie with me, which is funny, but I just was like, okay, fine, you know. But then I was like, do you want to watch the new ones? So I think we watched Afterlife and Frozen Empire like the same night or back-to-back nights or whatever it was, but we watched them really close to each other and she really liked them. And so I was like, oh, so there is Ghostbusters that you like, you maybe just don't like the old films, and that's totally respectable. But she really liked Frozen Empire even more than Afterlife. So I feel like this being the Frozen Empire house, it's cool because I'm excited for Nicole to be hyped up about it, and I just hope that it really delivers. Plus, like I said, in the past, I heard that the old Ghostbusters house was a lot of fun, so I hope this one just kind of follows in that suit. I did hear that they put some of their own scenes in there from what I'm hearing, so it's not all just following the movie, but I think for the most part it follows the movie. But like I said, I did hear that they kind of like had their own spin on it, at least from what I'm hearing. Which means that number 1 is A Quiet Place. And I think A Quiet Place just holds a special place in my heart again, pun intended, I guess, because I went into that movie like, so they don't talk, and it was like, no, not really. You know, Nicole was trying to tell me a little bit about it, and I was like, well, what's like the whole thing? And she's like, I don't know, I just heard like this. And we sat down on the couch, we put it on the TV the second they made the announcement that A Quiet Place was coming to Halloween Horror Nights. And we sat down, and if you guys know from the movie, like the scene with the kid and the shuttle and like the start of the movie, that scene happens and you're like, oh, and you know, a little jump scare there freaks you out and you're like, oh, and you don't realize how impactful that is because it's like, that's the entire movie. And I'm like, we're going to watch an entire movie where they're like not talking. This is going to be so boring. And I loved it, and it was fantastic. And the fact that they're going to be having, I think, sign language people in there and using that inside of the house, I think it's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be reactive to sound, maybe. So I think that's awesome. And like I said, then that same night after we watched the first one, we had dinner, and then we came back to the couch and immediately watched the second one, and it was just as good. So super, super cool movies. And the fact that you don't need to have so much dialogue and to have such an in-depth and just great movie makes me think that the fact that they are kind of experimenting with this house for Halloween Horror Nights makes me really excited to think that we could get something completely unique like we've never had before. And I do hope that we have some like sound reactive scares in there. I think it would be awesome. So that is my hype list. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. That is for the houses there. I'll go over the scare zones really quick. If I'm being honest, you guys know that I do updates around the park about a month and a half before HHN. And I mean, all year long, I'm doing so many other things. I'm doing Disney content, other Universal content, water parks, food, SeaWorld, bush, travel, cruises, whatever. But that month and a half leading up to HHN, I really like to showcase a lot of the HHN details because they do such a good job bringing the park to life. And I feel like some of the scare zones we didn't really get to see like come to life, specifically my number 5 of Duality of Fear. We have the truss as you walk in, and that's nice, but I just am like, I feel like I need a little bit more in there. You have your iconic icons basically of the year with Sinister and Surreal. So I'm like, what is kind of the like the whole thing here? I don't know. I know you're choosing a path, but it's like maybe we could even like get some signage or something in there just to kind of like bring it up. I don't know if anything else is coming out from what I'm hearing. I don't think so. I do know I think they're bringing the chainsaws back from what I was hearing from the podcast that they were talking about. So I guess that's kind of cool. People love their chainsaws, but I wish there was more to hype me up. Not saying any of these scare zones are going to be bad, but again, when we're talking hype, I've got to see something to get hyped up. And I'm not seeing a lot here yet, so it's just making my brain be like, okay, well, what are we going to do in here? How do we kind of integrate the choosing your path thing? And so that's kind of where my head's at right now. And that's why it's 5. Number 4 is Demon Queens. I'm kind of in the same boat there. We did start to see some stuff kind of develop inside of the scare zone. And I guess like just that theme isn't like totally selling me. So the idea of Demon Queens, and I think there's 4 of them they mentioned, just rotating through, seems okay, but you know, we'll see what ends up happening with it. I do know that they mentioned that they wheel out a like spiral staircase, so we're gonna see that hopefully kind of come to life and bring some more pieces inside of that scare zone. But kind of like Duality of Fear, I just didn't see a whole lot going in, and then finally they started to release some things, and I'm like, oh well, I kind of already have hype for the other scare zones, so kind of overlooking this one. Number 3 is Blumhouse, and I feel like a lot of people might be shocked by that. They might be like, why is, you know, it higher than the others? I guess it's like right in the middle though, and I think it's just going to be fun. You know, I think you're going to see some Blumhouse characters, and we all like the Blumhouse characters, so why not, right? You're going to see some Purge characters in the masks. You're going to see Freaky. You're going to see the Black Phone, the Grabber or whatever. You're going to see Megan, and I think it's just going to be a fun zone. You know, I don't think it's meant to be like a fun zone, but I think it's going to be like a social media zone. I think people are going to want to take photos with all these characters. They're going to be like, oh, it's the Megan. Now I can go like over here. Oh, you know, I can go over here by Black Phone or Freaky or whatever. I think it's going to be just like the social media zone of the year. Let's move on to number 2, Swamp of the Undead. And I just think this is the most beautiful zone that we have seen in a very long time. I think the way that they have dressed this thing up is fantastic. And I think it's gonna be a pretty cool zone. I'm just a little nervous for the costume designs. I don't know what's coming, so I think that's why I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna have it at number 1. But I think the set alone is just amazing. You guys have seen this zone develop from kind of just the basic things on the wall and like the grass that's kind of hanging on the fence to full-blown props through the entire thing. So that, I mean, that alone had me really hyped. And it was my number 1, but then my number 1 now is currently Torture Fair. Also, sorry if you see my cat's tail, he's moving. But with Torture Fair, I don't think it's going to be a fun zone. And to me, that started to make it a lot more interesting, because I was like, oh, we're going to have a 3rd fun zone, because I feel like Major Suites was kind of a fun zone. And then I feel like the Vamp, was it 69 last year? So we had a Vamp zone there, and I was like, oh, okay, so you had like back-to-back fun zones, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have a 3rd fun zone now, and I think it's gonna be like a serious and kind of dark zone. So all of a sudden it really swapped for me. I like, again, that kind of lore. I think it's gonna be fun, and you know, those machines and whatever that they have in there, those torture devices, look gross, and I think it's gonna be a pretty aggressive zone. And I'm just hoping that it turns out not to be a fun zone, and it turns out to be a serious zone, because I feel like we could really utilize one of those right there inside of New York. I think that could be a lot of fun. So yeah, that is my scare zone list. And now you have my top 10 houses, my top 5 scare zones. This is a hype list again, not my prediction list, just to reiterate. Obviously we have Nightmare Fuel. That is the only show, so there's no hype list to that. I'm just hyped to go see a new iteration of Nightmare Fuel. From what I'm hearing, it is definitely a different storyline, so that's going to be cool. I'm interested to hear what Nicole has to say, but also you guys have to let me know your hype list down in the comments below. I know a lot of you guys have actually sent them to me either on Instagram or, you know, in the park. Some of you guys have kind of told me, so I like to hear them, and it's kind of cool to see how people's minds think. But yeah, either way, there you go. That's my hype list for the 2024 season. 1 night away from opening night. I'm getting excited. I'm up late right now. I'm a little tired, but we got there. I've tried to stay spoiler free for the most part, but I am hearing that it's feeling like they did not cut the budget, and like things are looking even better than last year. So definitely the time to get hyped is right now, right as we go into opening night. I hope to see you guys around the park. We do have, I think, 1 more video coming out before our opening night video. But either way, we are there. It is time, and I am all for it. So if you did enjoy today's video, again, make sure to give it a thumbs up. We'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.